In this week's Parsha Tisa, Moshe is on the mountain receiving the Torah for 40 days and 40 nights when God suddenly tells him to go back down to the people. The nation made an Egel Masecha and sacrificed and bowed down to it. Moshe goes back down to Israel, and lo and behold, just as God described, he saw that they made an Egel Masecha and were now reveling in it. What exactly is this Egel Masecha that Moshe saw? Onkelos translates Egel Masecha as Egel Matecha, meaning a metal calf. Ibn Ezra expands on the meaning of the word Masecha by explaining that it is related to the word Nesech, to pour, meaning it is clearly of metal that was poured. Metal could only be poured if it is molten or melted. Ibn Ezra thus interprets that this Egel Masecha was created by pouring the melted metal, or in our case gold, into a mold in order to create the calf. So when Moshe came down the mountain, he saw Israel dancing around the figure of a calf that was made from gold that had been poured into a mold. While other commentators associate the word Masecha to still other words, perhaps though its modern meaning might actually make the most sense to describe what Moshe really saw when he came down the mountain. Today, in modern Hebrew, Masecha is translated as mask. We know from archaeology that the Egyptians primarily depicted their gods as human figures with a head of an animal, essentially of a person wearing a mask of an animal head. Being that Israel was in Egypt for hundreds of years, they would have been intimately familiar with this representation of gods and powers. So it is definitely within the realm of possibility to say that Aaron made a golden mask in the form of a calf that was meant to be worn by someone. As such, what Moshe would have seen when he came down the mountain would have been the people reveling in a person wearing a mask of a golden calf. Using this idea that the golden calf was a mask worn by a person mimicking the Egyptian depiction of gods and powers can also help to explain a couple of other things in the Parsha. Besides for creating their idea of a god, the people also declared that it was this masked person who was the power behind bringing Israel out from Egypt. The Ramban notes that the purpose of the golden calf was not to replace God, but to find a suitable replacement for a presumed missing Moshe. Clearly, a lifeless idol would not be able to replace a living, dynamic human being. However, in the people's minds, a person wearing a mask representing power could be a fitting replacement for Moshe, to whom many probably saw as larger than life, almost even divine. With this understanding, the sin of the golden calf was not actually against God, but against Moshe. As such, when Moshe later defended Israel before God, if Moshe was willing to forgive them when they sinned against him, how could God not also forgive them? Another idea. Later on in the Parsha, the Torah explicitly forbids Elohei Masecha. Why does the Torah need to prescribe them if they were already forbidden in the Ten Commandments? If we were to translate Elohei Masecha as masked gods, this could help explain why the Torah mentioned it after the sin of the golden calf. In the Ten Commandments, God expressly forbade making an idol or an image for divine worship, but didn't outwardly forbid a person from wearing a mask to represent power, especially when the mask wasn't meant to represent God, but another human being. After the sin of the golden calf, God closed this perceived loophole. Any and all representation of a power with the intention to worship or revere it is expressly forbidden, including or perhaps especially divine masks. Even though modern Hebrew is derived from biblical Hebrew and not always the same, perhaps though, it can help shed light on the past. Shabbat Shalom.